Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan. Adam, the time has come, my friend. We finally have some coaching staff news that's been reported. I know you have some information. I have some information. The fans have been yearning for this information, so we're going to get right into that. Plus, we can't forget. Now, before, we're doing this on Thursday night. Before all the coaching staff came out, we had medical staff stuff involving the team. Yeah, we can't forget about that either. So we have some information on that. So I don't want to waste too much time with pleasantries. We do this twice a week. We're going to do it right now. Let's get right into it. Coaching staff hires. Why don't I just go and talk about what's been reported, Adam, and then we'll kind of fill in the pieces and give our information. You think that's a good idea?
Yeah. I mean, we've confirmed everything that's out there. In fact, we have more than that's out there. So it's just a matter of
right.
What we do on the show, folks. If you're new to our show, we don't just go with what's out there. We want to know why things happen and what this means for the Eagles' offensive defense, because that's what you guys have told us through Twitter when we ask ITB questions. So, I mean, also, other than that, it's going to be mostly coaching this show, Geoff, and we're going to get to some questions. And this is, look, the combine's coming up in 3 weeks. So they had to get this stuff done now, and we'll explain in a second here when it got done, why it got done, and how it got done.
All right, well, the defensive stuff has been out there, so let's go through the most recent reports. 1, Press Taylor is going to be promoted to passing game coordinator. 2, there is not going to be someone wearing the official title of offensive coordinator. You're going to have Press Taylor in charge of the passing game, and offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland will continue to be in charge of the running game. He already was the run game coordinator. So you have a hybrid here, a pass game coordinator, a run game coordinator. Other reports, Rich Scangarello, I hope I pronounced that name right. He will now be brought into the offensive staff. He was with the Broncos this past year as their offensive coordinator just for 1 year. Before that, he was with Kyle Shanahan in both Atlanta and San Francisco. Andrew Breiner is another name in reports. He is interesting. He comes from the college level. He was most recently the offensive coordinator under Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. And Joe Moorhead was fired after the year, so Breiner was also unemployed. And last but not least, Aaron Moorhead, as we have talked about before, as Tim McManus reported a week ago, is still in play as a wide receivers coach for the Eagles. So those are the names. Let's start with Press Taylor, Adam.
Yeah, so let's just put it this way. They had like 4 or 5 offense coordinator candidates they were very interested in. They for various reasons being blocked. As we explained for our subscribers a couple weeks ago, the Ravens were not going to let James Urban out because the Eagles were going to take like at least 3 weeks to get this done. Mm-hmm. And they were not going to be set back by losing a coach, then having to hire another one late in the process, which is perfectly fine. From John Harbaugh's standpoint, I totally get it. If it was one thing, if they were going to offer Urban the job within a week, but they didn't. They Eagles, I'm told by pretty strong source, made it very clear this is going to be a thorough process, and they were not going to rush this thing. They weren't going to just hire from within. Which has really been a mistake, obviously, now because we have the results. Just didn't work for whatever reason, and everyone has a part of this one, of what happened last season. But going forward here, Press Taylor, one of the many reasons why he's getting a bump in not only titles, as we've said on the show many times, don't really mean anything. It's about responsibility. He's the one that's been here the longest. Remember, he was on Chip's staff. He was retained, and he does know the offense, obviously, inside and out. And he's going to be responsible for obviously bringing new ideas. But one of the things the Eagles wanted to be careful with is giving him too much responsibility, because there's a big step up for him. So Rich Scangarello, by the way, his nickname is Scan from coaches who are close to him, who I've talked to about him. I just want to learn.
So not Big S?
What's that?
We're not going to call him Big S, like Big V?
Right, Big S, right, very funny. Scan is right.
Yeah, very funny. Shut up.
No, I got it. No, but look, I know what it is because people have problems pronouncing his name.
Definitely
I was told it's Scangarello.
Scangarello.
Yeah. Right. Now, if Rich comes out, if he's allowed to speak, or maybe, you know what? I'm sure the Eagles, when they announce this stuff, will have it in the release, how they pronounce it. Teams typically do this because this is confusing. No question. You mentioned, Atlanta and San Francisco. What the Eagles were looking for, and when they reviewed, it is absolutely a fact because the tape shows it. There was a lack of creativity. You could say whatever you want, and you could not disagree with it. Well, you're not going with facts. Facts are that it was not the offense was not creative enough. That's what the tape showed. Now, part of it was because they couldn't give Geoff a lot of these bottom feeder players who had to play at wide receiver a lot of responsibility. Because if you give these guys who shouldn't be on the field a lot of responsibility mentally, they're probably going to break down.
Right.
That was part of it. That was part of it. That if we're being fair here, that was certainly part of it. But the other part of it was what the tape showed. They were not up to what some of the other teams were doing. Now, with Scangarello, when he comes in here, part of reason why he's here is because they want, when I say innovation, what they really want is ideas that have been successful. Well, the Niners just got to the Super Bowl. Not that Geoff Scan could be Kyle Shanahan. Look, he just got fired from Denver. Fair or not fair. Frank Reich, by the way, was fired by the Chargers. It's just that sometimes you bring in a guy in a different environment. He's going to have ideas which they clearly don't have. They don't have Shanahan's thought process, like which Scangarello is bringing in here. This is very important. Like this is why they talk to the kid at USC, who I'm told they really liked, Graham Harrell.
Right.
They want stuff that they're not doing. Simple as that. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. This is 100% why they're doing this.
I think of three things immediately with Rich Scan. We'll call him Coach Scan.
Go ahead.
And some of the things that we've criticized Doug Pederson's offense in the past, and this is not, I'm not like, we're not patting ourselves on the back, but we've talked about for over a year now that even when the offense is successful, our issues with the run game is that they tend to just line it up and run, right? They try to confuse you with their formation groupings more so than anything else. And we've always talked about try to get more creative, try to be more innovative. So three things I think of if Coach Scan has an impact is motion, misdirection, and play action. Doug, to be fair, his play action is, RPOs and maybe, you fake to the running back who's in shotgun and then you throw the ball. But obviously when you watch the 49ers, their play action is rolling out right, rolling out left. It's all folded into the misdirection and it's all folded into the pre-snap motion. So if that becomes a staple of the offense because Coach Scan is a part of it, I am all in favor of it. Thumbs up. The other half of me though says Coach Scan comes here and we'll find out what his title is. He's not offensive coordinator. I don't know that he's being called a position coach either. He may be a senior assistant. He may be in charge of things. I guess what I'll say is he's a voice. I don't know how powerful or prominent it's going to be. You hope that because he's on the staff, it's received, but he becomes one of 5 or 6 or 7 people. So I'm hopeful that he has that impact. I'm skeptical about how much he's really going to bring to the offense.
So let's go back to 16 and 17, particularly 17 when the Eagles had their Super Bowl run. Pederson, Reich, DiFilippo, Stoutland were the main voices, really, and Groh, by the way. So there were a lot of voices in their pass and run game, particularly their concepts that they ran. They were so far ahead. I mean, you and I have talked about the Denver game, the Chicago game, all the games where they blew teams out. No one knew what the hell was coming. They were so far ahead of where teams were. The coaching was phenomenal. The play calling was great. The quarterback was off the hook. The backup was off the hook when it counted in the playoffs. So what they're hoping is let's get back to more ideas because it got stale. This is you can't shoot a hole in it because this is what the tape showed. This is what 2 people told me who graded the tape. I'm using 2 sources of information who I swear by. These guys really are never wrong because these guys play football. This is why I ask these questions. Tell me what you saw on tape, and you just outline it. Very, very stale last season. Motion, movement.
I actually thought it was stale even the year before, and even the Super Bowl year. They just happen to have really good run personnel and a very good offensive line. I think that they've always been a little bit behind compared to what you see McVay, Shannon, with the pre-snap movement and motion.
Well, I would say this: in 17, teams had no idea what was coming. And we could say whatever we want about it. They weren't doing what the other teams were doing. Whatever they were doing was working. Teams didn't catch up to it. But this season, in addition to the personnel being bad because of injury, there just was not anything where you go, yeah, boy, we really got that team. They didn't know what was coming. There was none of that for whatever reason. So this is what the owner wanted. He wants what everyone else is doing. He's not. Laurie's not wrong in a way. But the whole process, the way it went down was you could scratch your head a little bit. I mentioned, Geoff, on previous shows that the head coach has got to communicate better with the guys who are involved. And we just outlined there might be 5 guys who have a say. When I say who have input, those guys have to be listened to. And Doug, if he doesn't like what he's getting, he's got to tell him why. Because this clearly was a problem last season. Doug's got to do a better job of outlining what he wants because it's never, if the owner gets involved, you clearly are not doing your job as a head coach. Period. End of story.
Is Coach Scan, in your understanding, is he taking on quarterback's coach title, or is that still Press?
I haven't heard that. Yeah, I haven't heard that. No, Press is still the quarterback's coach.
Okay, so Rich is more like he becomes an offensive assistant of some capacity.
Right. Maybe it could be. When I checked on him, I wasn't even asking for a title. I just want to know what his responsibilities were. He's coming in here to bring in Niners concepts.
Right.
And he's a senior voice who's been a coordinator. He's a smart guy. Maybe he wasn't ready to be the offense coordinator in Denver. Maybe he needed a second season, whatever. Maybe he just wasn't ready. But the fact of the matter is, as I mentioned earlier, Frank Reich was fired and he did a good job with Philly. So this guy is here to bring in, and you mentioned it very well, San Francisco's whole offense is based on deception. They don't ask you to win. Like the funny thing about the misrepresented story about the Niners offense, Geoff, is if you look at their receivers, they rarely ask them to win a one-on-one. It's all about creating space, and
absolutely
they just don't. And by the way, that is 100% why in the Super Bowl, how many plays did they make downfield?
Not many. There was that. Well, they, obviously Garoppolo missed.
Overthrew Sanders.
Yeah, he overthrew Sanders, but maybe only one. That may have been one or two attempts that were over 30 yards.
Right, and this has been the issue. Obviously Dante Pettis not working out, and Marquise Goodwin unfortunately getting hurt, who's their speed receiver. But here, so Rich brings this stuff in. He knows. You mentioned Atlanta, not only San Francisco, but Atlanta, where Kyle did a brilliant job.
Right.
So we don't belabor this stuff, just to move this going forward. This is why the guy from, I don't know much about the guy from Mississippi State guy. I don't know much about him. I just know that based on what I was told, a bunch of guys know him. I don't know whether they went through. I don't know if their scouts went through there, wherever he's been. I know he's at Fordham as well.
Well, here I can add to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I'm familiar with Joe Moorhead being a Penn State guy. He's basically followed Joe Moorhead. He succeeded Joe Moorhead at Fordham when both of them were at Fordham at one point. He was the offensive coordinator, Moorhead, and then Breiner was underneath him as I think he was coaching wide receivers and running backs at one point. And then Moorhead became the offensive coordinator at Penn State. Now that's significant because Penn State's offense in his 2 years there was lightning. I mean, there was Trace McSorley, there was Saquon Barkley, there was excellent tight end. They didn't even have the best offensive line, but they had great skill position and great scheming. And then he went on to Mississippi State to become head coach. And I think Breiner followed him there and was an assistant under him. So he's coached receivers, he's coached running backs. I think whereas
and look who he worked on, Geoff. Look who the Moorhead. That's
absolutely
important. Yeah, this is. This isn't just, okay, let's just go get some guys because we weren't happy with the offense. They actually really dug in. I still you could criticize it for taking 3 weeks, but for not getting the OCs that they wanted, this is a pretty good rebound for this football team.
Yeah, and what I like about Breiner, or at least I'll give the pros, I think there's pros and cons to everything. What I like about bringing in Breiner along with Coach Scan is you have Coach Scan, who's the veteran, who's brings a run game innovation blend that you're seeing in San Francisco and you saw in Atlanta. And with Breiner, working under Moorhead, that is college spread. Penn State became a spread offense, when not just when Moorhead took over, but obviously when James Franklin, but it really came into its own under Moorhead. tons of spread concepts. We talked about Andy Reid, right, in the last podcast about when he went to Kansas City, he didn't just bring his West Coast offense. He hired Chris Alt, who had coached Colin Kaepernick in Nevada, and he started incorporating all of the college trends into. And look at them now; they're one of the most innovative offenses in football. Well,
the most innovative.
Yeah, most innovative. The Eagles, again, don't really have a whole lot of that. And instead of saying we're going to take this guy Breiner, who comes from that kind of spread innovative offense, and make him offensive coordinator or really high, he comes in with another guy and he adds to the mix. So again, I don't know how loud his voice will be. I don't know how much his ideas will have an impact because he is an assistant coach who's not a quote unquote offensive coordinator. I guess he might be. I don't know what do we even know what his title is going to be?
I don't know. He's the only guy that, as we tape this for Thursday morning, he's the only guy that I just know that they were aware of him, and his name was suggested by people, and they did. You just outline, who he worked for, and this gives them all look. This offense at its core is a lot of college concepts, more than probably in terms of, obviously the Chiefs run more college concepts than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles are probably top 10, maybe perhaps top 5, but they're not the Chiefs offense. Let's not confuse it.
Right. Yeah. I still see the Eagles offense as a blend of the West Coast and the NFL spread. I don't think it's been necessarily as collegey as you're mentioning the Chiefs are. And so hopefully that'll be something that we see in the offense going forward. The big question we always get, Adam, and I think we need to readdress it. I tried to address it at the start by saying Press Taylor is pass game coordinator and Jeff Stoutland is run game coordinator, is, well, when are the Eagles just not going to hire an offensive coordinator? And I think it's important that we reiterate, Doug is the play caller. He is the de facto offensive coordinator. And these two guys, Jeff Stoutland and Press Taylor, are basically, you put them together and you get an offensive coordinator. It's just one is in charge of passing, the other is in charge of running.
Right. But Groh, though, you could call him the passing game coordinator. That was not his only job. His job was to gather information from all the position coaches.
Right. So that's the natural question. Now,
that's what I don't know. I really want to, because my biggest concern from talking to coaches around the NFL is that you don't want to give a guy too much responsibility, because he's a quarterback's coach. He's a passing game coordinator who's really going to head up all the passing concepts and probably gathering information from the other guys. Hey, what do you want this week? What are you looking at? Here's what I've got, and present them to the head coach. Whereas Groh had to present the run and pass game concepts, talk to every position coach. What do you got, Deuce? What do you got, Press here? What do you like? What do you got, Stout? What do you like?
Mm-hmm.
And Justin Peele, what do you like? All these guys.
Right.
So that's, and by the way, another thing we need to talk about, which just, I put it on my notes here, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. The other part about this is who's getting red zone, who's getting third down. We'll get it. I'll get all this stuff. It won't be a problem.
Yeah. I imagine Coach Scan, being the veteran here now in the group, might kind of inherit some of that pull everything together responsibilities, especially since, well, we don't have his title yet, but we know that he's not per se a position coach. So he's got to do something along with just coming up with ideas.
Oh, right. And by the way, Scan was a finalist for the OC job with the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, it wasn't a secret going in the process. He was supposed to be the OC. I just don't know what happened.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. So that's good. I want to give a big picture look at this all, because I think everybody was waiting for this and they want to know what it all means. And so for me, Adam, I'll give my opinion on it. I don't think this is a whole big change other than bringing in two guys who have different ideas. And again, we'll see how much of a voice they have. But as you mentioned, Mike Groh was really the passing game coordinator, and we already knew that Stoutland was the run game coordinator going back to 2018. So it's not a huge deviation from what they've had. And the Eagles themselves kind of gave the impression that they needed newer, fresher blood and ideas by firing Mike Groh along with Carson Walch, right? And so they created that perception, and in promoting Press Taylor to the spot he got, and then bringing in two other guys who, we've yet to see their title, but it won't be offensive coordinator, it does kind of make it look to me like they were looking for something and just didn't exactly get what they wanted, and now they've got to kind of go with what they've got. And
like I said, the real story. Okay, the real story is this: there were 4 or 5 guys who won as OC. They didn't get him. They had to look at a way to make this work without completely giving press everything, where you give them quarterbacks, be the OC without play calling, where you're getting all the, like Groh had to do, get all the coaches stuff, giving way too much responsibility. Because, by the way, Groh is not the quarterback's coach.
Right.
Think about that.
Right.
So in a way, Press is getting, he's a quarterback's coach. He's a pass game coordinator. So he's not getting, while Press is not getting your usual OC job without play calling. He's close. This is a lot for him. And look, they do, obviously they've really liked him because he's withstood the test of time here. When you look at all the coaches have been let go and left and so forth. So
right. Well, I still think at the end of the day, the fate of the offense next year is still about Doug and whether or not A, guys stay healthy, and B, some of the personnel moves they make work. You know, you can talk about coaches until the cows come home. It's definitely important, but obviously you need healthy, productive players to make your coaches be able to do their jobs. And we'll see if they can do that. We'll get into the health a little bit in a few minutes with the medical staff. I want to say one more thing because you and I have kind of been on the same page about this. Again, last year, the Eagles finished 12th in points scored. Not great, but we also know how many injuries they had. They were 4th on third down, 3rd in the red zone, and 2nd in time of possession. So the biggest thing I've seen from fans is wondering, again, this search almost created an impression for fans that this offense was really in need of fresh ideas and new ideas. They scored 30 some odd points in the season opener when everybody's healthy. Who knows how good they could have been if just Deshaun himself stayed healthy, and we would have had a totally different opinion. So the Eagles created this perception. Now they believe they've rectified it. We will see going forward. But I was of the mindset that it wasn't as bad as they made it look, or the fans made it. By this time, we're thinking, oh, my God, we need all this new blood. And I'm not sure that was necessarily true.
Well, look, here's the thing.
Every offense could be helped out. I mean, I'm not going to say that you can't get better. I'm just saying.
No, but you're right. Okay, so before we move on here, we'll get the receiver coach in a second. If they didn't have the injuries, it would just become how well did they do. But the other thing is, look at all the players that regressed. By the way, Wentz is, as much as we love Carson Wentz, he regressed a little bit last season. Okay.
Oh yeah, certainly with mechanics. We've talked about that.
Yeah. So,
but is that solved? That's my point. They bring in all these players. Who's coaching the quarterback now?
It's Press Taylor, is my understanding. He's the quarterback coach / passing game coordinator. So right. I don't know that anyone else is going to have a heavy voice. He's running that quarterback room. The guy who runs the quarterback room is almost always the guy who is closer to the quarterback. And in this case, it's 100% the case. So I think it's fair to say that, what you just brought up. But the thing that's go back to the tape. The tape shows they were not very creative this past season for whatever reason. And we mentioned the injuries. They just overall were not up to speed with what some of the other teams are doing. And that when people upstairs see this, and there's some games where guys were healthy and they were not scoring, you're going to ask why, and that's what happened here.
That's fair. I mean, we've talked about before how creative can you be when you're just yanking guys off the practice squad every other week, and you're just literally trying to get them to understand the playbook.
Exactly.
But I do agree that we've talked about the run game for 2.5 years now, maybe not being as creative as it could be. So you mentioned the wide receivers coach. If there's going to be a coach who I think really will come in and make a big difference, it might be that guy, because wide receiver is a position where I think not only did you see injuries, but you did not see good talent development. You saw talent regression, right? Certainly from Iguodala, Mac Hollins never panned out. We know they went through Gunter Brewer and Carson Walch, and those guys didn't have a ton of experience. So if it winds up being Aaron Moorhead, who you've said is their number one target, right? And we know he's still
that's what I'm told, Geoff. Barring a surprise, it would be Aaron Moorhead. Now, I will tell you, they've looked at a minimum of 5 or 6 college receiver coaches. And they've done a pretty thorough search here. So who is Aaron Moorhead? Aaron Moorhead, I follow this guy's guy. I love the bottom feeder guys, in the NFL. He was with the Colts. I just find it interesting because sometimes these guys like Greg Ward get a shot. So Aaron Moorhead, over time for the Colts, he was also a Super Bowl winner in 2009 with them when they beat the Bears.
Right. He
was either their 4th or 5th receiver. He was a special teams player. But I mentioned this on the last show. and why I brought up Moorhead in last show.
Mm-hmm.
And Carson Walch can't. This kind of sounds ridiculous, but it's true because people in the NFL told me this. Different people told me this. Carson Walch is, what is he, 5'8", 5'9", little guy?
Yeah.
At a diva position, Aaron Moorhead 6'3", 6'4". He's imposing. He's an imposing guy. A lot of energy, by the way. A lot of energy from talking to people who know him from the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. Now I have no idea how they found him. I've escaped me, but he's been with Vanderbilt. Look, their numbers aren't great at Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt historically has had, obviously has not been a very good football program other than having Jay Cutler been there.
Right.
But if he doesn't get the job, then either he decided not to take it because they want him, or someone came in late, real late, who was not part of the process, and was a guy that they had an eye on who they didn't think they'd get, and the guy came in.
Right. I, by the way, in speaking to a source, had the sense that this thing was fairly close. So I wouldn't be surprised if Moorhead was named named wide receiver coach the same day they make the announcements on everybody else.
Yeah. I agree. The reason why they haven't done it, historically, the Eagles have not done piecemeal. Some teams do piecemeal announcements. Some teams will wait. They don't care if the reports are out for 3 weeks. They won't update the website, a la like the Eagles, which is fine. And they're going to announce them at the same time. And the other thing is what we don't know. Do they get, we know Stallin's going to get the, because he's been it. And I think his contract might be up.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's going to happen here is he's going to get the run game coordinator title because he's been the run game coordinator, and Deuce is the one who does the substitutions. So that's not going to change. It's exactly all Geoff's going to get is a title change, a title addition, so he can get more money.
Definitely. By the way, another interesting point to bring up there is that you wonder if they were ever going to officially name someone OC with Deuce still on the staff, and obviously not wanting to create a perception that somebody is outranking the assistant head coach. I have no idea, but we talked about that in general. How do you bring in somebody else and give them a title better than either Deuce or Press? And here in this situation, they may not have to.
Oh, and from the outside, right. No,
right.
Well, look,
from the outside, right.
Anyone they were bringing in was going to have to be the OC because you couldn't bring you unless you got a college guy. Like you couldn't bring in the kid from Graham Harrell, not have him be OC without. You just couldn't. Why would he? Because that it's not just responsibilities, but for monetary purposes. Because college, big time programs, these guys get paid a lot of money.
No doubt about it.
No
doubt about it. All right, yeah. I want to get into the medical staff for just a few minutes on that, and then maybe try to get to some of the questions from the listeners. But before we do that, we got to pause for a word from our great sponsors. Hey, it's Geoff Mosher. Adam Caplan and I love using Anchor for our Inside the Birds podcast every week. It's so user-friendly, anyone can create their own podcast, and you should too. Just download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor gives you everything you need to start your own podcast from your phone or computer. Its creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast for a professional sound, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many other platforms. It can be heard by everyone, just like Inside the Birds. You can also make money from your pod with no minimum listenership. What are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to create your podcast today. Hey, it's Geoff Mosher. Are you interested in money? Yep, I thought so. Well, on the Talk Money with Mesh Lakhani podcast, Mesh will follow paper trails, chat with experts, and break down complex ideas to bring clarity to the mystical financial phenomena and help listeners uncover the story behind their money. Each of these compelling stories will hit a broad range of subjects ranging from buying Bitcoin, dealing with student debt, and everything in between. So if you're interested in money, and I know you are, check out the Talk Money with Mesh Lakhani podcast on Anchor. All right. Adam, earlier, a couple days ago, Jeff McClain, the Inquirer, reported that there was yet another shakeup in the medical staff, that the contract of Sean Holes was not renewed, along with Shireen Mansouri. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Sean Holes was brought in here by Chip. I mean, he was so well regarded for what he did as far as bringing the sports science program into Chip Kelly's, daily regimen, that Jeffrey Lurie made sure to retain him even after he fired Chip. And Shireen, I believe, was hired as part of that new wave of medical people before the 2018 season, which wound up having even more injuries than the 17 season. And then 2019 came along and there were even more injuries. And a lot of them, she was a rehabilitation specialist, is I believe what her
Correct.
title was.
Yep.
Well, clearly we saw rehab was an issue for the last 2 years. And Sean Holes, sports science, I mean, his job was kind of keeping guys, healthy and being able to ready to go in a way that's different from a head trainer, right? Just having them on the program and what they're eating and drinking and what they're doing, their whole
nutrition, right? All of it. Yeah,
right.
It's very important for recovery. Right. I'm a vegetarian, and I can tell you, when I don't eat right, I don't feel right. I feel tired and sluggish. It's very important. You can't dismiss sports science. Let me give you a little fact most people are not even aware of. I'm one of the few people know this. So in Chip's first year, they were the only NFL team not to put a player on injury reserve during the regular season. Do you know how incredible that is?
I remember that. That was amazing.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen. And
it didn't happen again. I mean, it was very good first year.
I don't think I can't, Geoff. I study this injury stuff religiously. Mm-hmm. I've never seen another NFL team do that. I've covered the league for 20 years.
Right.
Now you could say certainly there's luck involved. I'm not going to deny injuries. You turn your ankle, you turn your ankle. Mm-hmm. But when you have a series of soft tissue injuries for many years, mm-hmm. you have to look at the way these guys are being trained. And Howie Roseman talked about how they brought in that czar, the guy who would from, I think it might have been from Penn Medicine. The guy's name escapes me, but Howie did bring it up. He brought it up when at the season-ending press conference with Pederson about how they brought this guy in to look at the way that their processes are in terms of rehab and everything. So I don't know. I'm not privy to what this guy told him, but I find it interesting that Sean Holes is highly respected. And by the way, the word around the league was that he was let go, or not. He was told he wasn't coming back.
His contract was up, right?
Yeah, right. He was told he wasn't coming back a couple weeks ago. Somewhere around the Senior Bowl, I heard the rumor that was going around. There were a lot of Eagle rumors, by the way, at the Senior Bowl. A couple of them were preposterous about Jim Washburn, as I mentioned before, coming out of retirement. It was the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. I should have smacked the guy around and brought that up, but
just like Jim Washburn would have done.
Oh my God, yeah, that's enough. We're going to tell Jim Washburn stories probably in our June shows when we have more time. But to move this forward here, so Shireen is very talented, but Geoff, here is I talked to a couple of people about this. She did not have a large history of rehabbing football players,
right?
And football players are not one size fits all. They're not. You don't rehab football players the same way you rehab soccer or baseball.
Yep.
Okay, that certainly is something I thought was fair game to bring up because people I trust around the league brought this up to me when I asked about it, including one head athletic trainer, one trainer a guy who's been in head athletic trainer before. I said, "Give me what do you know about this particular stuff?" And he didn't know it personally. He goes, "Just so I understand, when you rehab people, you want to have a history of rehabbing a lot of football players and have had success." So it's fair game to bring that up, but she's very talented. If you look at her resume, it's very, very strong, and I get why the Eagles hired her.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, let's go back to us because a year ago, around December, so more than a year ago, when there were all these injuries last year, the 2018 season, we did a whole episode on what's going on with the medical staff, and we pointed out that after they won the Super Bowl, which if you go back and look, it seemed like they had a lot of injuries then. I think it was just more that they had injuries to really important players like Jason Peters, like Jordan Hicks, 10 weeks of no Ronald Darby, but they didn't have nearly as many injuries as the following year and the following year. But after 2017, Howie decided to fire a lot of the medical staff who had been there for a long time and replace it. There were a lot of reasons. Some of the stuff was getting out to the media, and, you and I kind of called into question why you would win the Super Bowl and reshake up your whole medical staff. Well, I think it's fair to look back and say it probably wasn't necessary. And now that you did it, you're now trying to correct mistakes that you made in your waiving hires. You're right. Shireen Mansouri, it probably made sense as a hire rehabilitation specialist. But when I remember reporting, when I looked into it, the one thing sources kept telling me was, look at the resume, look at the experience. And, she in particular, it wasn't just her, but she in particular had not worked for an NFL team. She had worked for some players, but it's different when you're in charge of an entire team. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, last 2 years, rehab has not gone as planned. So here we are with yet another shakeup.
Yeah, it's really hard because it's impossible to percentage on it. Some of this is clearly luck.
Right.
But the other part is, how are you rehabbing these players? Do you have the sensibility with today's NFL player, who you can push and who you have to pull back from? This is part of being when doctors assess injuries. Oh, this guy should be back in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your typical. Let's say it's a grade 2 MCL sprain. 4 to 6 weeks is your typical grade 2 MCL sprain.
Right.
If it's an offensive lineman, the guy could come back within 3 weeks. This is just because he doesn't have to run very far. He's playing in space. Some guys, if he's a receiver, it's probably going to be closer to 6 weeks because you got to stop and start. It's a speed position. So where you got to run. So you got to run and cut. So you can't expect this guy to come back before that.
Right.
These are the things that are when you do injury assessment. Sometimes it comes down to the player and time on task as a medical professional. You have to be able to read this stuff. We're not doctors here, but we know from talking to people. You brought up that show we did a year ago, and I think it was before that. What I think you and I both said on that show was that we had heard they're not going to do it. No, we had heard that the Shireen and who was the other person?
It was the head trainer, I believe, who was also new. Correct. That we were
right. Jerome Reed. Right. There was that the word we were getting was how he's going to stick by them. How could you get rid of them after 1 year? You got to let them, learn. And that's actually when Howie did his press conference. He basically said that.
Right.
So it's a shame. It really is.
And by the way, Jerome has kept his job. He is still the head.
Yeah. He's still there. He came
just letting people know.
Right. Yeah. Right. So we only know of the 2 changes. Mm-hmm. I would not rule out anything else. We'll have to see. Mm-hmm. And when they make the announcements, they may make medical announcements then they may not. They also may have some title additions to some coaches who deserve more money, and that's kind of what happens this time of year.
All right, let's get to Ask ITB, Adam. We had some pretty decent questions. I think we addressed a lot. There's just a lot of questions that were about, should we be worried about the Eagles not hiring an offensive coordinator? I think we explained that they just have 2. One's in charge of passing, one's in charge of running. People have asked to explain why the other targets they interviewed weren't given the job. And I think you've done a pretty good job of laying out that, some of them wanted to remain with their team because the Eagles were taking and told people they were going to be taking their time. Right. So teams don't want to let guys go 3 weeks into the offseason. So that was responsible for some of the issues here. Do you have anything else to add on that? I think that's pretty much what we've added for those kind of questions, right?
Yeah, no, that's really it. And then here's a good question here from @senior_Fonzie.
I love it. I was just about to read the same question.
Okay, I'll read it. Do you think the OC group will have any input come free agency / draft season? Also, do you think they'll ask one or more offensive mind to the? I'm not sure what he means by this. Do you think they'll ask one?
I think he means add.
I'll add one more. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the S and D are very close to each other.
Yes, thank you. They'll add one more offensive mind to the group. So, Alonzo, they Scangarello they added. He's absolutely going to be a big voice in terms of concepts. This is one. Remember, the Eagles. Oh, one thing I do need to add: the Eagles had interest in talking to one of the Niners guys, but they couldn't because Kyle was not going to let them out.
Mm-hmm.
So they it's that old saying, if you can't beat him, join him. So what they did was they went out and got a guy who was free, Scangarello. He's going to have input, and that's kind of where I see it going.
All right, Luke Kelly asked a good question, Adam. @LukeKelly65 on Twitter. Any thoughts on how the Birds could attack free agency versus the draft, rumored targets for each? I mean, look, you and I have talked about this a little bit already, but defensive back, corner, safety, and wide receiver, they've all got to be priorities. Now, the question really, Adam, becomes is Howie has not been active in free agency as far as long-term deals or big money since 2016 when he signed Brandon Brooks and Rodney McLeod. And that's been intentional. They don't want to be that kind of team anymore. But it doesn't mean they're completely against it. They want to bring in the right type of guy if they're going to do that. It's hard to say they can fill all these holes in the draft. I mean, I think that they are going to have to maybe be slightly more active in free agency this year than they have been in the past. Do you see that, or do you think they just go 1 year deal vets and then draft picks?
I still feel strongly, first of all, at receiver, and we're obviously very far away from free agency, which starts March 18th, for goodness sake. Why does it have to start so late? Anyway,
I know, really
stupid. Deshaun, barring a shock, will be on the team. But as I said a couple of shows ago, that they can't depend on him to be on the field. Whatever they get out of him is a plus. I expect him to add 2 receivers with speed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's free agency, there are not a lot of them. Robbie Anderson, they've had significant interest in the past. But, man, he's had a big injury history. By the way, Howie said in that press conference, and he was a great quote, that with injuries, hoping a guy, he said hope is, I forget what exactly, something like hope is not an answer, something like that, which he meant you can't hope that a guy plays through injury.
Right.
So if I'm going to read him correctly, he's going to go away from bringing the injury guys.
I would agree with you on that. And I mentioned it, either 1 or 2 pods ago. If there's going to be a free agent, foray there, I would strongly look, and I'll say look. Obviously it's too early, right, Adam? We don't have any concrete reports, but Demarcus Robinson of the Chiefs is a guy that I think the Eagles will look into because they've looked into him before and they liked him coming out of Florida. We all know Howie Roseman loves his Florida Gators, so that's a name that I would keep my eye on when we get to the free agent process.
Yeah, when you brought that up on our show a year ago, was there any specific that you knew about that?
Well, I knew, they liked him coming out of the draft. He has a relationship with Greg Lewis, who he's actually paired with right now because Lewis is the Chiefs wide receiver coach. But remember, he was Doug Pederson's wide receivers coach a couple of years ago when he was drafted, right? He went to Florida. I know the Eagles worked him out. I know Howie has called the Chiefs and just to inquire about his availability in the past, because DeMarcus he was a special teams guy. I mean, his first 2 or 3 years, he was not a polished wide receiver. He was a little bit of a project.
Correct. He had to grow up a little bit too.
Yeah, he had to grow up, and he also had to, learn to be a receiver. And you saw this past year when asked to make plays, he made plays. So I think, again, you're right that the Eagles need to focus on speed and young and athletic, but you can't just get like 5 new guys in the draft. So he would be a good guy to bring in while you're also drafting at that position.
Right. He's not a speed guy. He's sort of like he's got decent size. He's over 6'1". He's a good special teams player. He's really grown up. I'm told by a Chiefs source, I think I mentioned this last week, that he's more of a backup, like a 3. That's really what he's not a starting receiver, but he's a puzzle piece. And the thing is, the terminology they use is West Coast, Eagles and Chiefs do. He'll be able to come in. He's really, really taken to coaching, and this is gonna help them. Oh, then the other thing I want to mention with the receivers is that if it is Aaron Moorhead, you can expect them to be coached harder. That's the one thing is these guys have to be coached hard.
Absolutely.
This has been another issue for what I've heard from sources is that these guys got to respond. And here's the thing though, Geoff. And I know this could be an historic receiver draft. It's very, very strong. They've got every NFL team, it's not just the Eagles, is going through this right now. You got to have great information. We'll get KJ Hamler is one of my favorite receivers for the draft. We're going to have exclusive information for our subscribers here.
Did you just say that just to make me happy?
No, actually, I put a scoop out, I don't know, like a month ago on him before I think either the day he made his decision or the week. It was a Sunday during the NFL season, and I had some great intel on him from other teams. Because I always look at the locals. Temple, as you know, I don't know how they do it, but they usually have pretty good NFL players for a program that's been obviously up and down, but better now.
Yeah.
Hamler's, he is explosive as hell.
Hey, how great would it be for him to come to the Eagles if Deshaun Jackson were to be back and kind of be a mentor? I mean, they are almost identical like players with the diminutive size and the great speed and the deep ball tracking. So that would be a nice little
He's small though. By the way, Hamler had an ACL in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're not going to do draft stuff right now, but just keep an eye on him. Oh, and then for people asking about targets for free agency, we'll have them at the combine 100% for sure. This is where I get all the free agency stuff, but we always get stuff before that, but a majority of it for the people who are asking about free agency, we'll get it in about 3 weeks.
All right. Our last question comes from Broads81 on Twitter. At Broads81 wants to know why our producer is so handsome. Interestingly, our producer,
according to whom?
Hunter Brody at Broads81. I bet, Adam, I have a fact that you did not know.
Go ahead.
Hunter Brody is appearing. You've probably seen the commercial and don't even realize he's in it for an MGM betting app commercial that's on ESPN all the time, where it's like got Charles Woodson in it and a bunch of talking heads who like to scream into a microphone.
Oh, yes.
Just like Hunter Brody does. He is in that commercial for, what is it? I think it's 0.2 seconds. I even was able to get a shot on my phone of
Hunter, did they ask Hunter to use his permission?
Hunter's nodding. Yes. Remember, he's like silent.
Oh, because that's
Silent
awesome.
Bob from WIP years ago.
Please do, Hunter. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm on the pod.
Our executive producer,
Hunter
Brody. Yeah.
Yeah, so they did reach out to me, a whopping 0.02 seconds, and it pays the bills.
Now tell him where you really screwed up, Hunter. Where I said you messed up.
Well, I don't remember. So clearly I wasn't paying attention.
You signed right away for the money they offered you, not realizing this thing was going to spread like wildfire. You got paid well, but I think you got underpaid. You need an agent.
Yeah, I do. Well, listen, if you know anyone, maybe you can pass that my way.
Yeah. I'll have my people call your people.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, that's going to do it. Make sure you check out the MGM commercial with our own Hunter Brody, our executive producer. He's the guy with the backwards hat in the kind of the blue outfit screaming into a microphone for 0.2 seconds.
And by the way, Geoff, I might be if the Sixers don't make a trade at the trade deadline, I might join. Hunter has a very, very popular podcast on YouTube, show on YouTube. I'm telling you, I am gonna yell like Hunter, as much as Hunter yells on the show. I might break the sound decibels.
I look forward to that.
Okay, if they don't get a shooter, I am gonna break this damn desk I have here in my office.
Well, as we do this podcast, Adam, the Miami Heat have acquired Andre Iguodala, so they're getting better while the Sixers are staying pretty much who they are. So we'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. As we always do, we thank our friends at 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you download their free mobile app. You can hear me. You can hear Mike Gill, Ryan Rothstein. We're on from 2 to 6 every single day at the Sports Bash. Eitan Shander from 12 to 2. Make sure you're checking out phlsportsnation.com. They are enhancing the fan experience with all their great coverage. They are fantastic partners and affiliates, and they put out really good content on the Eagles, the Sixers, the Flyers, and the Phillies, who are about to start up, getting excited for that. And, of course, go to the YouTube page of the one and only TV star, commercial star, Hunter Brody, our producer, and check it out at Sports Talk with Broads, and you will see some of the greatest fan takes that you will ever see in Philadelphia. All right. Thank you, everybody. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds.
If you're listening to this, you obviously like podcasts, and you probably like music too. On Spotify, you can listen to all of that in one place for free. That's right, you don't need a premium account. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcast so you never miss an episode. You can download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are. You can easily share what you're listening to with your friends via Spotify's integrations with social media platforms like Instagram. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now. Just search for Inside the Birds on the Spotify app or browse podcasts in the Your Library tab. And follow me, Geoff Mosher, so you never miss an episode of Inside the Birds. Spotify is the world's leading music streaming service, and now it can be your go-to for podcasts too.